Hello and welcome to our TMP on the problems with international slavery by Cydnei Ivory, Alexa Yingling, Violent Dilemma, and Niko Karatopoulos. So, our topic is about international slavery, which is seen all throughout the modern world in the organizations like the United Nations, where impactful topics are discussed and conversations around them are important. However, we will discuss how international law does not meet the needs of particular countries and the ways that they are enforced and being effective aren't in the most effective means. And we also discuss how laws at the local level can be beneficial versus a overarching law with less reach and specific nature. Over to Alexa with our first argument.
While there is slavery everywhere in some form or another, there are obviously different types of slavery found throughout the world. Different types of slavery are present or more prominent in different countries. The international laws of slavery do not focus on the individual needs of countries, and they do not focus on the different types of slavery found in those countries. For example, the slavery most prominent in Africa is child labor, but the slavery most prominent in Asia and the Pacific is forced marriage. These are two very different kinds of slavery that come with very different issues and consequences. International law doesn't focus on the specific problems of these two countries, instead, it focuses on slavery in its entirety.
Thank you, Alexa. Those are some great points. It is very essential to look at laws and what they affect and what they target, as different countries have different needs. I'm talking about international law and what problems it aims and does actually solve. And what I have researched and found is that countries, primarily the countries that are signatories or sponsors to these agreements, for example, in the Rome Act, there were 21 countries that were helping in the drafting and planning committee, and all of those countries had previous legislation against slavery within their own government. So countries already have these laws, and international law does not fix the initial problem and the largest problem that most countries can't enforce their laws to begin with. If we can look on the right-hand side, I made two Pascal's wagers to look at what happens when countries follow international law or follow local law and are able to enforce them. The first chart, we can see that if there is international law and countries are able to enforce them, then there is action. But as Alexa said, the action taken here is limited because it's not specific to a country's needs. And if there's no international law, then it falls on if a country has a local law or does not, which isn't necessarily decided. So really, there's only one good solution here, and the choice is very limited. Versus the bottom Pascal's wager, when we look at if there is local law, where there is a definite yes and there is definite action, as that country is able to enforce laws that are effective for its country. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense as a country that can't enforce laws and has no laws, there's not really a point. But both of these, the point I'm trying to draw is that from the local law to the international law, there is little change. And what needs to be focused on is the ability to enforce laws. And that international law does not fix. It doesn't fix, leaving it kind of ineffective. And that leads over to a counter-argument on the benefits of international law by Cydnei.
Although it is said that international law does not meet the needs of a country, international law benefits nations by promoting economic development and by maintaining peace within nations by protecting groups and individuals. International law promotes the economy due to international trade agreements that is able to come from these laws, and it also encourages investment in domestic and foreign businesses. So ultimately, these investments as well as these trade alliances boost the economy of not only a nation but the world. International law has also allowed for 500 multilateral treaties to be deposited, and these treaties cover great and controversial, influential topics in our world today, such as environmental protection and human rights. For example, international law gives protection to those who are migrant laborers and to those who are negatively affected by human trafficking. And this protection falls under the international humanitarian law as well as other laws that protect human rights specifically. Along with this protection that comes from international law also brings peace by resolving conflict. It establishes a certain basis and standard for which a conflict should be settled, and this basis leads to the creation of an overall solution for the issue at hand. And it also makes an attempt to lower the levels of violence in the world, which could possibly lead to growth across the globe. The pictures that I have here show how international law acts as a cause and effect for benefits in the society. International trade leads to economic growth, and treaties such as peace treaties leads to peace across all of earth.
Those are some good points as to why international law was well intended, but it's still better for us to have governments with independent laws instead. It also shows us the large and impactful improvements that were made from a local government versus what the international law had done. But this also shows the significance of what the U.S. has done in the past, such as in the 1800s when the U.S. had declared a law that made slavery illegal, but it would still continue for a while longer in more offset places. And yes, this broad law that the U.S. declared was somewhat effective, but states and counties were really the ones responsible for making an impact on the issue, similar to how international law can be declared, but individual counties are the only ones who can make more specific and enforceable laws. One of the most important reasons we need a smaller government with independent laws over an international one is because it is overall more efficient when sending out messages and dealing with issues among groups of people rather than just a general whole, where some laws may not even apply.
That really sums up our argument how if international law is this broad, overreaching thing, it may be more effective to have smaller governments that are actually performing that act, that know their capabilities and can make laws that are more effective towards that country and its spending and its capabilities. And so why does this matter in the real world, and how is this effective? Well, international law may be helpful in certain cases as it builds a bond between countries, but it isn't a standalone solution. Countries, like said by Alexa, have specific needs and are met by local level governments that know the needs of their countries. And with a correct approach to slavery, with research into how laws are created and what they target, slavery can be a feasibly fixable issue in our modern world. And with the right approach, we can fix this problem. Thank you. That's our TMP. Here are our citations. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good evening.